We all love a good fright fest when it comes to our scary movies, and what better person than John Francis Leader from UCD, a psychologist, to talk us through the psychology, actually, of scary movies. John, tell me more. This is intriguing.
So it's Halloween, which is that time where I come from the shadows and like to talk about fear. And Halloween is interesting because it's culturally been that. It's a time to kind of lean towards the darkness in some way. So a lot of the time we're spending our time trying to avoid fear, although we do certainly experience it. So horror films are an opportunity to kind of explore that dark side. And I suppose as a psychologist and as a therapist, what I hope we can do with it is use it as an opportunity to understand a little bit more about fear, why we feel it and how we can understand it more.
Well, John, I'm an absolute scaredy cat. I can't actually even watch scary movies at times. I'm the classic person behind my fingers or behind a pillow. What is it about scary movies that are both enthralling and awful?
Well, the thing is that fear is part of who we are, and we sometimes try to repress it and push it down or try to wrestle with it in different ways. But for thousands of years, our ancestors have had it as a mechanism to keep us safe. So we're kind of fascinated by it in some ways because it is part of who we are, yet at the same time we don't like it. I think what, as much as possible, we're trying to raise awareness around is that the fear itself isn't the bad thing. That's the fire alarm that keeps you safe from the actual danger.
Right.
But we're in a bit of a world nowadays. We don't have the lions or the tigers to run away from. So watching a horror movie in a way is a chance to get back to our primal identity a bit, which is really interesting.
So people love to be scared, basically.
Yes, essentially. Yeah, we have that.
What happens to your body metaphysically and psychologically when you watch a movie that you're terrified of?
Yeah, and there are both levels to it because our perception does come into it, our own beliefs, the various archetypes that exist in movies are part of it. I'm wearing right now an Empatica E4 device, which is measuring in real time now my heart rate and my electrodermal activity, which is the electrical conductance of my skin. So as my heart rate rises a bit or as I get a bit more stimulated while watching a horror movie, we can register those changes. And it's interesting because we can now make solid or concrete a little bit more, things we would have had to guess about before.
Now, of course, there is kind of different types of horror movies. I mean, we have the kind of bloody, gory horror movies, and then we have the more psychological movies. So how does that change as well, metaphysically? Because you obviously have your little reader there. What happens in different ways? Yeah,
and there are individual differences with that because, of course, when something is more gory, in some ways it is more visceral, and that primal sense of danger when we see the blood can be alerted. But, of course, one of the big problems with this is that if you don't do it right in a film, you get this kind of uncanny valley effect where it looks fake and therefore isn't scary.
Gotcha.
So when it's done well, it can be very effective. So that's why I think a lot of cinema does better with the psychological, because that creates a space for our own imagination to fill the gap. Whatever we fear most, we can bring that in, and that can be really terrifying.
Well, what is the most terrifying? I mean, obviously you have kind of animatronics, or you have ghosts, or you have something that's a little bit more boo out of the closet. What's the big ones that
It's interesting because it can be culturally very different. And if you think of examples of Japanese horror versus, you know, various types of slasher movies in other parts of you really see that, because if you can play on the archetypes of a culture, and even better if you can do it personally with an individual and know what they're afraid of, you can make it really, really scary. So it does vary a little bit internationally, and you'll find that people as well culturally, some people more the chillers will do it. Some people the jump scares are going to do it. So there's quite a bit of individual difference. When I'm working with clients, that's what I'm trying to find. What is it that does it for them, and how can we increase their resilience to be able to respond better to those kind of
For me, it's
triggers.
everything. For me, it's everything. I'm not really good with horror movies. I'm sure you experience a lot of people that aren't. They get quite caught up and upset when they watch horror movies. What happens to us people? What happens to us?
And I have clients who avoid them exactly for that reason.
I do.
It's interesting because psychology very often is the opportunity to engage with those things we fear the most, but to realize they're not actually as bad as they sometimes seem, that the fear, as I say, is actually a protective mechanism, because adrenaline can be energy. You can be excited about going on a holiday, or you can be scared. Either way, there's energy in the system. So it's learning to harness it and to use it effectively.
Yeah, I do watch them, but I kind of avoid if I can. There's lots of people that love them, though. Talk us through those that really relish in a good old horror movie.
Yeah, well, the stimulation is a big part of it. This adrenaline junkie point is that in a way we're not built and we're not adapted to just sort of sit at desks or to talk during the day with other people. If you think of thousands of years ago again, we're designed to run from predators chasing us. We're designed to, at very least, work in a physically active way during the day. So actually getting the heart rate going a bit is a sort of a thing that we really miss sometimes when it's not there. And that seems to be part of the morbid fear. There's also a sense of just breaking the ordinary, isn't it, the mundane?
Of course,
so good horror does that. There's a chance to do it. So, you know, psychologically, what concerns me, I suppose, is often we're not getting a chance to do that throughout the year. You know, maybe it's only when Halloween comes we're able to lean into that.
Exactly.
So the problem is that underlying stress can be there either way. So I think if we can learn to recognise it a bit more and work with it, maybe we'll have a monthly Halloween instead of an annual one.
Oh, it sounds good for all you guys that love horror. It's brilliant. Listen, thank you very much, John. Appreciate your time.
Great to be here.